Hello, everybody. It's Shapoopi here. How are you all doing? As you can very clearly see on your screens, this is for the Sims 4 City Living expansion, and if you read the video title, you would know also that this is a review. Now, I was gonna release this video a little bit earlier, but then I decided to hold off a little bit, because I thought that I wouldn't quite do the game justice if I only played it for a few hours. And since this is for your guys' benefit, whether you want to buy it or just or curious about what the expansion actually had in it, this is the video for you. Since this is also a review, we will sort of break down the game into pros and cons and things like that. And yeah, just to help you make a decision on whether you want to purchase the game or not. But ultimately, of course, that is your decision, and this is just my opinion. But since this is also a Sims game, Sims games are usually broken down into like three major game components, that being the create a sim, the build mode, and just the general gameplay. So we will be looking at those three main categories, and if you just want to skip to the part that you're most curious about, there will be timestamps in the description, so definitely check that out. And if you just wanted to see some raw gameplay footage, just check out my first look video, and I'll go through just normal Sims gameplay, make a house, make an apartment, create a household, and all those Sims, and we check out all the new stuff and things like that, as well as the new careers and aspirations. But that's about it. At the very end, I will go over the pros and cons of each of the three categories, once again, that being the cast, the build mode, and the gameplay, and I'll give my final recommendation. So let's get started. Alrighty guys, first up we have cast or create a sim, and obviously the create a sim is such an important component of the Sims experience, because more often than not, people like to be able to create themselves in the game that they're playing, as well as making characters that they're imagining, and having everything, all these tools at your dispense, and all these cosmetic items and clothing and things like that really help to bring your character to life. And with this expansion pack, I feel like they definitely made a big step forward by introducing a whole bunch of diversity. A big part of this expansion was to try and introduce different cultures and things like that, and you can definitely tell with a bit of the fashion that there were obviously some traditional garb. There were saris and some more silk Japanese, Chinese type clothing. And personally for me, this was so freaking exciting because I am Asian, and it was nice to be represented, while I am obviously also very westernized, it is nice to have some cultural representation of your traditions and things like that in the games that you play. And with Sims being, again, something where you're playing, you can either play yourself or make other characters, you want to be able to create diversity, and since they've already taken a step forward with making that fluid gender identity, this was only the next logical step to also bring cultural diversity. This was also a big thing for me because growing up, I grew up in Toronto, and or Canada for that matter. We're not a melting pot, we're a cultural mosaic, so we have white, black, brown, Asian, all the different types of people growing up together, and we all celebrate our own religions, our own cultures, and we experience them together as well. So it was really freaking cool to be able to, say, create a Muslim woman, someone who wears a hijab, or maybe make a Sikh who wears a turban. And so while a lot of the garments can be a little bit exaggerated culturally, which could be a little bit, make it what's the word? It can be a little bit awkward or sour tasting. What's the expression that I'm thinking of? But anyways, it can come off a little bit awkward or strange, but at the same time, they also made it very accessible for people who don't necessarily know what those cultures are. And so, and by what I mean by accessible is that they are not totally traditional, but they are also very modern. you could definitely see someone who not necessarily is a part of that culture or religion. They could wear those garments on the streets and it wouldn't be completely out of place. And so a lot of the cast items are also very typical of what you'd imagine it for a big city. So the way I sort of rationalize some of the more colorful items and things that I usually wouldn't wear was that in big cities, high fashion's a big thing. A lot of hipsters, a lot of people who are just trying to sort of set themselves apart. And especially this also comes into play being there so much focus on the villages being for cultural diversity, artists, as well as sort of fashion and things like that. So you can see that these items are more what do you call it, they're a little bit more out there. And even to further exaggerate that, being a game, you can have your Sims wear something a little bit crazy and be comfortable with that. And so I totally love all the big colorful pieces, the Letterman jackets with all the cool school colors you could imagine, and it takes a little bit of imagination, but over and all, the cast is really freaking cool. You can go from making a traditional Muslim woman wearing a hijab to a South Korean pop star, and you can finally actually make those characters very real. As well, these new items that they've added to the game also work very well with the game, the cast items that are already there, so you won't have any trouble really mixing and matching. But then again, this is a guy's opinion. I don't spend too much time in the cast clothing because I think everything goes together. So overall, in the cast department, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. The pros being that it's refreshing having so much diversity, as well as it working well with existing items. It also allows for a lot more unique Sims. Very similar point being to the first one, that it's just there's a lot more diversity in what you can create with your Sims. And lastly, there's a lot of items that are work very well for the careers that come with this expansion, which is really cool. But the cons being that there aren't actually too many items that they've added. I feel like they could have done just a little bit more, maybe a few more general cultures and things like that would have been a little bit more interesting. I feel like they were a little bit limited to large populations, like maybe the Chinese populations, or very media-centric, well-known garbs like Indian saris, hijabs, and things like that, as well as Chinese silk shirts. But anyways, let's move on to the build mode. So with build mode, the first obvious big thing to point out is that this time you're not building houses, you're building apartments in build mode. So apartments are set dimensions, they're limited to the size and shape of the apartment building that you're living in. And I know a lot of people were looking forward to actually building their own apartment buildings, but that is not a thing that you can do. Usually in each apartment building on San Yoshino map, you'll see that there are certain levels that they have highlighted where you'll be actually building your apartment, or refurnishing, I should say. And usually these levels will have either one or two apartments to choose from. So you'll always have a neighbor living across from you, always someone to interact with, which is really cool. But we'll get into that in the gameplay section. Another important point about the apartments is that you can set traits for your apartments. This gives a little bit more character than your houses. So not only do your Sims have character traits, but your apartments can have traits. So they can have traits like, there are gremlins that come bumping in the night, and they things break a lot more in this apartment. Or there's one that increases the aroma of your cooking, and so it increases cooking skill faster, and people are always coming over to try your food. So there's a lot of cool things like that for the build mode, but those are also more gameplay, but I figured they were worth mentioning here. So in the background you can see me refurnishing an apartment from our first look video, but I gotta say, the build mode, again, it was similar to the cast, that there weren't too many items added. I felt a little bit disappointed with some of the items, while other items were obviously very cool, but that's normal, you know, you're not gonna like everything that's added. And I think most of the items, they fall into two sort of categories. There's the modern, and then there's the industrial. So there's a lot of rusted pipes, old wood, and lots of natural tones, neutral tones, and things like that. There's like steel beams and geometric rocks, and there's just a whole bunch of industrial items. I don't know how else to explain it. And then there was the modern, you know, which sounds strange, but they fit very well together with the industrial vibe, you know. There's a lot of stark lines, blacks and whites, which go together with everything. There's a lot of space saving things and things like that. And I tried to use mostly the city living items, but I eventually did run out of those items to use, and I didn't want to repeat them too much. But that then forced me to use them with items that already exist in the game, and I gotta say they work very, very nicely together. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do, and they also added a lot of items that are sort of career centric. So they have a lot of new technology for the social media career, and yeah. But again, pros and cons. The pros being that they work together really well with the items that are already there, with the other expansion packs, as well as the vanilla Sims 4 experience. But cons, again, I felt like that they could have added a few more items to sort of add a little bit more diversity to the apartments. But I'll give it a 7 out of 10, you know. It's not bad, but it certainly could be better. All right, and last up but not least, we have gameplay. Gameplay in Sims 4 City Living expansion, I gotta say, is a freaking hoot. It is so much fun. It is so enticing and interesting. There's always something to do, and I think this is the main selling point of the expansion. Comparing this expansion with all the other expansions like Dino and Get Together and Get to Work, I feel like City Living added the most. If you guys had to pick between all the different expansions and City Living, I would definitely suggest City Living. They add 3 careers and an aspiration, and all the careers are super fun. You can work from home. They ask you the option to work from home, and very often these careers ask you to do extra things at home or go out into the neighborhood. And so for example, the political career will ask you to go and talk to citizens and try to get them on your side to support your causes and things like that. The social media career will let you live stream video games from your computer or from the television if you have like a gaming console. There's a whole bunch of cool things to do like that, and those continuously help you in your career. The critic, you can write articles from home. You get to go visit locations and do critiques and things like that. And the careers were a lot of fun. I played with each of them. I didn't get too far in the critic, but I did play a lot of the social media and political career, and those were super fun to play. And there's neighbors added to the game. Now I'm sort of just rambling, and there isn't really a whole bunch of flow to what the gameplay adds, but I have to say the gameplay is very interesting. I think the biggest point I would take away from the City Living expansion gameplay is that it really forces you to it doesn't force you, but it does a very good job at pulling you out of your apartment. When I play Sims 4, I am always just playing in my house, working on my skills, and I never interact with anyone until time comes to marriage. Like recently in my Aliens LP, I had to have a party so that I could have people that I could invite to my wedding. But in City Living Expansion, it does such a great job with festivals, giving you a good reason to go down, see what's happening. It's always interesting. There's always events going on, games to play, and skill boosting rewards and things like that. So there's always a reason to actually go down and check them out. Same with the careers. They do a great job at trying to get you to talk to other people, to make friendships and things like that in a living city. Neighbors will come over and bother you, eat your food and break items and make too much noise and all that stuff, and that also forces interaction with other Sims. And so with that said, so the one point being that there's always something interesting to do, and it pulls you out of your apartment into a living city, is that it feels like a living city, that there are actually other Sims living here. They come down and interact with you, and they're not just in the background. They actually exist in this area too. They're not just, walking around your neighborhood waiting for you, that one off chance that you're going to walk to the sidewalk because there's a mineral ore to dig and stuff like that. But yeah, the gameplay is super fun. There are snow globes and a lot of other collectibles that you can sell for money. So you can be a bum in the city too. You can make money from absolutely nothing and get an apartment. The penthouses are pretty cool, but I have to say, if I had to pick out one disappointment, one con for the City Living Expansion gameplay, is that there aren't too many apartments, plots, and things like that. You cannot set the shape of the apartment building, which is not a huge deal, but sometimes it's like you want to extend a wall, but you can't. You can't place windows where you would like them either. And there's only a few places where you can actually build a penthouse. The biggest one being there's only one plot. I believe there is a pseudo penthouse suite. It's like on the edge near the top, but those were my only two gripes with the gameplay, with that there being only a few apartment spots for penthouses and stuff like that. But that's easily remedied by simply starting a new game and saving your household over there. But if you wanted them to live in the same city, that would be a little bit tough. So overall, for the gameplay, I give it a 10 out of 10 because I'm not too upset about the apartments, but do be wary about that you cannot build your own apartment buildings, you cannot extend walls, and there's only a few plots for penthouses and things like that. Alrighty guys, here we go for the final tally. If you guys sat through all that, I highly appreciate. That's very nice of you. But again, we'll go over the pros and cons for each of the three categories: Create a Sim, Build Mode, and Gameplay. For Create a Sim, I gave it a 8 out of 10. It was really refreshing to have all that diversity, all the cool items, high fashion that you would see in big cities. But on the cons of that is that the ethnic garbs could be a little bit exaggerated. They didn't quite hit the mark on some of the traditional garbs, but on the same side, or rather on the other side of that coin, is that it is a game. These religions may not exist in the world. They're close enough and they are made accessible, which I think is the most important point. So they're not exactly very hard and fast rules for these religions or cultural garbs. They kind of, made it their own and made it a little bit more modern, which was really, really cool. And since it is a game, I felt like that was, totally appropriate. Sort of the evolution of these cultures and things like that in The Sims 4. And next up we have gameplay. I gave a 7 out of 10 because I felt like it felt a little bit short of what I was expecting. I would have liked to have been maybe build my own apartments, or at least add a little bit more add walls and windows where I wanted them. It felt a little bit restrictive, but they tried to make that up with adding traits to your apartments and things like that. But I felt like, again, they were a bit lacking in items and things like that. But what they did add to the game definitely meshed very well with the city living theme. They work well with items that already exist in Sims 4, and it's not a huge game breaker that the build mode didn't have more items. And last but not least, we have gameplay. Gameplay I gave a 10 out of 10 because I definitely felt so absorbed into the city that they had created. It felt alive. I was happy to go down into the village that I was living in, see what was going out. There were always festivals and stuff going on. There was so many new faces, Sims that I could talk to. The careers helped with that. The neighbors came over bothering me all the time. While I definitely felt angry at them, it made the game interesting and fun. I was like, God, when are they gonna go away? I think the gameplay was the biggest and most important part of this city living expansion. It added the most to the game as well, and yeah. So as a final tally, we have a 25 out of 30. I don't know what that means. It's like an arbitrary number. Well, not totally arbitrary, but you know, just the sum of the three parts. But I would put the cast and the build mode sort of, I should weight them a little bit less than I did the gameplay, because the gameplay is truly the saving grace. It is the most fun I've had with an expansion, and I definitely think it is worth it. If you guys are holding off on buying it, definitely just wait for a sale. That's always the best time to buy it. I'm never one for just rushing for it, but if you were going to buy one anyways, definitely get City Living. And if you were in that weird position where you're just going to pick up one expansion, like you had to ask your parents because you don't have your own job, I would definitely do City Living over any of the other expansions. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it is a little bit it's a little bit wonky, a little bit haphazard and hacked together, but they'll get better. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I have lots of other videos coming up, and as always, I appreciate you guys so much for any likes, comments, and shares and subscribes and things like that. So I'll see you guys next time. So bye bye for now.